Welcome to the High Risk Payments Playbook, the podcast for partners and merchants operating in complex industries. If you're navigating chargebacks, underwriting challenges, compliance hurdles, reserve or volume limit challenges, and approval roadblocks, you're in the right place. Each week, we break down the realities of high-risk credit card processing, what works, what doesn't, and how to build sustainable payment strategies focused on revenue growth for industries where others struggle. This is where strategy meets execution. Let's get started.
Welcome back to the High Risk Payments Playbook again. We are so happy to have you here in our next episode. Now, for today, we have a very nice conversation that we have for you, that we have prepared for you. And then we're going to be asking a couple of questions, but the first one is why high-risk merchants get shut down and how we can avoid it. Now, on the last episode, we talked about understanding a high-risk merchants and why they are high risk, and also how you can identify a good processor. Now, but I'm not alone today. We have a special guest. Again, we have Lisa in the house. My name is Renee, and so we're so happy to be here with you on this episode. Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Hi, Renee. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you. I'm
Awesome.
just excited to start.
Good.
Alrighty. Well, Lisa, we have a question from the audience to start this conversation today. Could you please remind us how a merchant will know if they are a high risk?
Sure. So if you want the full download, we talked about that last time, so you could always go back to that episode. But the quick version is high risk merchants either fall into certain industries like adult and travel and coaching and information products, weapons, digital download products, debt consolidation, those kinds of industries that are where their product is mostly subjective. That's one way a merchant is high risk. And there are a couple other ways. If you are a subscription or membership-based merchant, if you have a high average ticket, a high transaction amount, every single transaction is $1,000 or more, that automatically pops you into a high risk category. And e-commerce. All e-commerce merchants are also high risk. That's the Cliff Note version.
Okay, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, absolutely. Guys, if you like to see more and review a little bit more about this information, we highly recommend that you listen to the previous podcast episode. Now, why do merchants commonly get shut down, Lisa?
Well, to be honest, most of the time, the vast majority of merchants who get shut down, it's because they're with an aggregator. So, or also known as a PayFac. And the biggest ones in the US are Stripe and Square and PayPal. And what an aggregator means is that they have one single merchant account. And even though they might board millions of merchants, they put them all under that one single merchant account that is theirs, right? And they have to protect it and they have to manage the risk associated with that merchant account. Remember, we're going to talk about risk a million times.
Yes.
This is another kind of risk involved in this industry. So the aggregators, let's just say Stripe, for instance, has boarded 10,000 peptide merchants, right? And something happens in the peptide industry. Like last fall, there was a lady outside, I believe it was Chicago, who was dosing herself with peptides, took too much, and very, very sadly passed away. And when that happened, the aggregators, the Stripes and PayPals and Squares, swept through their entire portfolio and shut down, without warning, mind you, shut down every merchant that is a peptide that they had in their portfolio. Not only did they shut them down, but they also held any funds that were due to those merchants, right?
Wow.
And that's the only way that the aggregators can manage their risk, because they don't underwrite. You and I could go on to one of them right now and open a merchant account in the next however many minutes, and they wouldn't know if it was me doing it or if it was somebody at the North Pole pretending to be me and putting fake information about their industry and their everything in that profile to create a merchant account that's completely fraudulent, right? So they assume a lot of risk because of that, because they don't go through the underwriting process. So most of the time, when a merchant is shut down without warning, it is because they are with an aggregator. There was no underwriting process, and that's how those guys manage their portfolios. Now, when you are with a processor that does underwrite, there are a couple instances where a warning could be presented to a merchant that their account is going to get shut down if some certain activities are happening.
Okay. Thank you. Well, you know what? This is information that definitely is very important to know. And that's another reason why choosing the right processor is a key element whenever you're opening a merchant account, right? Now, on the last episode, we talked about chargebacks. What are chargebacks and how do they affect a merchant account? Can we go over a little bit more on that one?
Yeah, sure. So a chargeback is when a customer of a merchant, right, has made a purchase and isn't happy for whatever reason with that product and has tried to reach out to the merchant for some sort of remedy and hasn't gotten anywhere with that merchant. And so then they feel like their only option is to call their bank and say, I'm going to dispute this transaction. I shouldn't have to pay for it because, right? Because it wasn't what I ordered, because it's a extra small and I wear an extra large. It's a whatever, right? There's something wrong or unsatisfactory with the product that they received. Okay. And so they call their bank and they say to their bank, maybe it's the bank of their credit card. Maybe it's, if they use their debit card, it's their everyday bank, but they call their bank and they say, I never got this product. It never arrived. The merchant said that it was delivered, but it wasn't, or I got it, but it's unsatisfactory. I've reached out to the merchant. They won't help me, or I can't get a hold of them to help me, and I need to issue a dispute. So the bank, of course, because that's their customer, says, sure, we'll help you with that. So they issue what is at first a dispute, and to the merchant, that comes in the form of an alert. So it doesn't begin as a chargeback immediately. It begins as an alert. Now, from the moment the bank sends that to the issuing bank of that person's credit card or debit card, sends that through the process, it's almost instantaneous, takes a few minutes. The merchant will get an email from their processor saying, you have an alert. You need to pay attention. Typically, from that moment, that merchant has 10 days 10 business days to respond to that alert before it becomes a chargeback. And they can do things like they can dispute it themselves and say, we sent the exact product that customer paid for. We haven't heard anything from that customer, or we're just going to issue a refund. They can straight away issue a refund. So they have the option to dispute an alert, or they can issue a refund, right? If they want to dispute it, they have to do it in writing. There is a process. The paperwork that they get will outline that process. And then, they go through back and forth with the issuing bank. And if the issuing bank determines that the merchant did not do the right thing, it will evolve from an alert into a chargeback. And then once it's a chargeback, the merchant pays a fee and they are required to rectify it in some way, or the bank is just going to debit them that purchase amount, right? So the customer gets their money back and the merchant has no control over it at that point. Once the issuing bank of that person's credit card has decided the merchant was wrong and they're going to issue that refund to the customer, the merchant pays it out of their account automatically, and they have no control over that happening. So you can imagine when we're discussing risk that if a merchant has an excessive amount of chargebacks, either in a given month or over a period of time, that then flags the bank, right? Their processing bank, their underwriting bank, that, hey, something wicked this way comes. The merchant is not doing the right thing
Yeah.
in, in
Nothing
this,
is going on this account, right?
yeah, in this X amount of cases. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there are likely other cases that are not being charged back, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of an indicator that the merchant isn't behaving properly, that some bad thing is happening. And so then the processor, the bank, will communicate out through the processor. The underwriting bank will communicate out through the processor to the merchant, hey, we need some information about what's going on. You've had X amount of chargebacks in the last, say, 30 days, and it is possible that we're going to shut down this merchant account if we don't understand why that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a merchant very well could say, you know what? We got in a shipment of products that we were not happy with. We have issued refunds in every single case. We don't expect this to happen again. This was an isolated incident, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the bank could say, okay, we'll cut you some slack and let their account keep going, although they will continue to monitor it with a very close eye. But
Mm-hmm.
if that merchant doesn't have a chargeback issue moving forward, everything's fine, right? So
Mm-hmm.
chargebacks are an indicator to the to the underwriting bank that
Mm-hmm.
there's potentially some funny business going on with that merchant. And it basically means, hey, we need to keep an eye on it.
Definitely. But I mean, as a merchant, right? I mean, I do have time to exactly see what happened and then review what is the chargeback and see if I can do something, right? Before he gets a chargeback
Yep.
activated on my account.
Yep, that's right. I tend to think about it as the alert to chargeback process as being like arbitration, right? There are
Yeah.
two parties who disagree, and there is a third party, which is the issuing bank, that is
Mm-hmm.
going to say, okay, we're going to investigate this on your behalf. We're going to go back and forth. We're going to measure the information that we've gotten from the consumer and from the merchant, and we're going
Mm-hmm.
to make a determination. So it's very much like arbitration.
Yeah, absolutely. And 10 business days, I will say it's enough time for you to see and review and see, what things can be done, fix it before it gets a chargeback.
Yeah, but the key there is the merchant has to pay attention, because I
Yeah.
cannot tell you how many times I have seen an alert move to a chargeback because the merchant ignored their email, or they read their email and didn't think it was a big deal. And so
Yeah.
they didn't do anything about it. They didn't respond. If the merchant doesn't respond, then it's going to become a chargeback, and there's nothing they can do about that. They have to be a part of the process.
Yeah, that is correct. And that's why I do consider this topic and this information, it's very important to understand because like you mentioned, right? I mean, sometimes they don't realize how important it is
Yeah.
until they see it already on their account.
Yeah.
And then maybe at that time it's already too late to do
Yeah.
something, to
And
get it out.
this becomes an issue for partners as well, because
Mm-hmm.
when I'm looking at merchant statements, when a partner brings me a statement for review,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always looking at their chargeback ratios.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will say to a partner, they're not really an ideal merchant to board because they're having a chargeback issue. But then what we should do is get them on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
advise them properly about how they can help mitigate some of those chargebacks, circle back in 90 days or so, and then with the partner, and pardon me, I'm so hiccupy. And then with the partner, reach out to the merchant and say, let's look at your chargeback ratio and see if it's gone down, if it's more
Mm-hmm.
reasonable, right? Because there are ways to manage chargebacks. Merchants just need to know what they are.
Yes, absolutely. Now, we already know what chargebacks are and how you can avoid it pretty much and how you can work with them on the time frame that is provided. Now, what happens if you have too many chargebacks? What happens to that merchant's account?
If your account is with an aggregator, like we mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to shut you down. Like, they're just going to arbitrarily shut you down, hold your money and shut you down. If your
Mm-hmm.
account is underwritten, you will get a warning from your underwriting bank via your processor that says, hey, your chargebacks have escalated. If this isn't reversed or managed with a tool or in some way,
Hmm.
over the next 30 days, then potentially we are going to shut your merchant account down.
Okay. Thank you. Now, we're going to get a little bit more technical here. And I wanted to ask you about the MCC coding
Mhm.
and the misunderstandings and how we can understand what it is and what it does. So, what are the MCC codes?
Okay. So this is a big topic.
Yeah.
MCC stands for Merchant Category Code.
Hmm.
And you are allocated an MCC code when you apply for a merchant account. And it's just a 3 or 4 digit number
Hmm.
based on your industry. So for instance, the very first MCC code ever was 0789, and it's for veterinarians. So anytime
Hmm.
a processor sees 0789 as their MCC code, they expect that that merchant is a veterinarian. They expect that they're going to have an average ticket around $150, $200. They're going to expect a certain amount of volume. They're going to expect that the vast majority of the transactions you run are card
Hmm.
present, right? The customer is right in front of you with their credit or debit card. They are going to expect there won't be a lot of chargebacks, right? Typically, people don't charge back a visit to their veterinarian, etc.
Hmm.
So when they look at merchant activity as they monitor it over the course of a month, they're going to expect that certain thresholds are met because the MCC code says you are a veterinarian, right?
Hmm.
When
I
you
see.
are with an aggregator, you will put in hopefully what your actual industry is, because remember, you're doing this all yourself, Mr. Merchant. And so you could say, yeah, I'm a veterinarian, or you could be a I don't know, something illegal. You could be an alcohol, you could be a bourbon manufacturer and say that you're a veterinarian, and the aggregator would assign you the
Hmm.
veterinarian MCC code, but you in fact are not a veterinarian, right?
Yeah.
And so your
Hmm.
behavior is going to be different than what the processor is going to expect and the underwriting bank is going to expect, and it's going to flag. And if it flags that you are outside of ratio, because let's say maybe your average ticket is $20, right? People come in, they buy a bottle of bourbon, it's $20. Your
Hmm.
average ticket is $20, and you're doing $1,000 a month in volume. That would be outside a typical veterinarian's ratios, right?
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
would also be a red flag if you set up an e-commerce store to sell your bourbon and you were doing all card not present transactions. That
Hmm.
would also flag. So as um, underwriting banks and processors monitor merchant accounts, they expect a certain alignment of behavior. And if it
Hmm.
does not align with what MCC code is associated with your merchant account, an aggregator is going to shut it down. That's another reason why they shut down accounts.
Hmm.
An underwritten account will be flagged, and your processor will reach out to you and say, "Hey, was there some error when we set up your merchant account? Because we have you as a veterinarian, but it doesn't look that way. What's going on?" Right? And
Hmm.
look, human beings underwrite, it's people. Very occasionally, mistakes do happen.
Yeah.
They're usually caught, if your account is underwritten, they're usually caught almost immediately because those accounts are monitored. But occasionally it just happens, right? And you'll get a note from your processor, and they will say, "We think something might be wrong with your MCC code. Please tell us again what your product is and how you're taking cards, blah blah blah." And if it needs to be revised, it'll be revised. But
Hmm.
that's yet another risk of being with an aggregator.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And now that we already talked about MCC codes, how the MCC codes impact a merchant account if they not done properly.
With an aggregator, it's potentially you could just be shut down, right?
Okay.
And don't forget your funds held. And if your
Hmm.
account is underwritten, like I said, it would likely just be a flag as they monitor your account. And
Hmm.
then, if nothing is rectified, I guess potentially your account could be shut down. But I don't know that I've ever seen an underwritten account be shut down for that.
Okay.
Usually it's flagged as the account is monitored, and whatever revision, if any, needs to be made is made, and then
Hmm.
you're good to go.
Okay, perfect. Now we already talked about processors, on this conversation and the previous one as well. Now, just to try to get a little bit of more understanding on processors' behaviors, um, if I am a merchant, why do I need to have a reserve on my account?
Okay, firstly, not all merchants do.
Okay.
High risk merchants tend to. So, for
Hmm.
my partners out there, this is a good way for you to understand why an underwriting bank might ask for a reserve. So there are a couple things that they look at when they're going to set up a merchant account.
Hmm.
They look at first of all, the reasons why that business might be high risk, right? Are
Yeah.
you in an industry that is travel, that is weapons, that is adult, that is information products? Because the card brands, the Visas, MasterCards, and so on, have statistics and data that they have a very clear understanding that those industries have more prevalence of chargebacks and perhaps fraud than a restaurant or a retail, pet store, that kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
And so they might ask for a reserve because they are anticipating, because of your industry, that you will have X amount of chargebacks. And if you go out of business, they don't want to be out that money, right?
Yeah.
Because remember, an underwriting bank is behaving like a bank. They are using the money that flows through that bank, including your merchant account, to fund when a customer wants to take money out of their account, right? When you go to the ATM, you're getting $100 or whatever out of that ATM. That money comes from the bank, and a
Hmm.
bank needs to have cash on hand to manage all of their customers' needs and obligations.
Sure.
And if they have to buy money from the Federal Reserve because they're at a deficit that day, it's expensive. It's expensive to a bank to get a day's worth of money from the Federal Reserve. They don't
Hmm.
want to pay those fees, right? A bank is an industry. They're there to make money like everybody else.
Hmm.
So they want to make sure that your cash flow and your transactions are going to flow properly. They're going to get funded from the issuing banks, meaning, again, whoever issued your credit or debit card. And they don't have to worry about their risk of not having enough funds to cover what their customers need. And so they might ask for a reserve to cover any chargebacks they anticipate you having. They might ask for a reserve because there is a very high chance that your business might not survive, right? They
Hmm.
have industry data on how long a business in each industry on average survives. And so let's say you are restaurants, for instance.
Hmm.
Restaurants have a very short shelf life on average. They go out of business far faster than other industries. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not going to say that they're going to ask for a reserve for a restaurant, but they look at that kind of data, right?
Hmm.
And so they will ask for a percentage of your anticipated volume. Typically, it's somewhere between 5 and 10%. So if
Okay.
you do $100,000 a month in volume, they might ask for a $10,000 reserve, which means they're going to take a certain percentage of your merchant services activity until you hit that $10,000 threshold. And then they will stop and hold that money for X amount of time.
Okay. And now that you talk about and holding the money, how long does it take? I mean, how long does a bank hold reserve funds?
Well, that's a big question too, because the answer is it depends. It
Hmm.
depends on why they're holding it. Um, it holding it because of your industry. They're going to want to see a good probably 6 months of activity
Hmm.
and make sure that you don't have chargeback issues. You don't have a lot of refunds. There's nothing, you don't have giant peaks, spikes, and dips in your activity, right? You're very consistent. Banks love consistency. If they're holding it because you had chargeback issues, they're going to want to see several months, probably 6 months of merchant statements to make sure that you didn't have any chargeback issues. So they didn't have to worry about covering those chargeback fees and dollars refunds. So it depends on how much volume you do, what your industry is, what your history is with processing and like chargebacks, refunds, unapproved transactions, all of those things. And then any anomaly behavior. Are you a business that does very little until you do a product launch, right? So you're cruising along, you have very, very little activity, and then your volume spikes. That's a riskier merchant than if you were consistent. So there is no generic answer to that question. A lot of factors play a role in a reserve, but typically I have never really seen a bank hold a reserve longer than a year if there's no hardcore reason to. If you show consistency and good faith, then they will release a reserve.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. Thank you for that info. Now, what are some red flags that a merchant account or red flags that a merchant account is having issues? Like, how can I understand? How can I see those red flags that my account are having issues?
So the short answer is anything that does not present consistency. So it could be the way you do business, meaning you have product launches, right? You don't do really any volume until you launch. And then 3 months later, you have another launch. And 3 months later, you have another launch. It could be because you're a seasonal business and you need to be set up as a seasonal business if you are, and properly, which means you need to have an underwritten account, because then a processor will be able to sort of freeze your account, if you will, put it on hold until you need months of activity. And then they will sort of bring that account back to live. You process for your season like a ski resort, right? They're not open all year. They're open from maybe November through March, typically. And so April through October, in most years, they don't need an active merchant account, right? So it needs to sit on hold. It needs to be dormant, because that then matches the expectation that that business does with the underwriting bank. And so there's consistency. Again, with the chargebacks and the refunds, and any spike in declined transactions will be a red flag, right? Because likely that means that there's maybe some fraudsters who have the same card number that they've acquired, God knows how, and they're trying to run that account for probably $1 to make sure it's active 1,000 times, right? So if a underwriting bank or a processor sees 100 consistent transactions for $1 a piece, that's a red flag, right?
Yeah.
That likely means there's some funky behavior going on that's not real or not above board.
Normal.
So it really is important. Merchants need to understand this, and partners need to understand that it is important that they have a payments partner or a payments processor that monitors their account, because we're looking for any of this anomaly type behavior to keep accounts healthy and safe, right? And if there is any funny business, then sometimes it becomes very urgent that we open a new merchant account, and that one that has some funny business on it gets shut down. So, every situation is different. Every underwritten account is reviewed individually, and whatever appropriate action is taken between the processing bank, the processor, and the merchant, where everybody should be on the same page.
Okay. And what can merchants do about it?
About any red flags? Well, frankly, keep an eye on your email and answer your phone when your processor calls you, or when
very important.
When the processing bank calls you, right? Either one. Because we reach out when any anomaly behavior happens, the good, bad, or otherwise, because we want to make sure that it's real, that the merchant's aware, and that, if the processing bank has any questions, we can share with them what's going on so that they don't get alarmed that there's some bad behavior. So answer your phone or return a call and check your email. And if you get any notices, respond.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will be very important to keep your information updated as well, right? Your
Yeah, of
email
course.
and your
If
phone
your
number.
processor doesn't have your current phone number or your current email, nobody's a mind reader, right? We can't get a hold of you
Yeah.
unless we have current information. So you're right. That's a great point. It is very, very smart for you, Mr. Merchant, and
Mhm.
everybody's partners and everyone involved that the merchants share current information with their processor.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we end this episode today, Lisa, I really like to have a recap about what we have just discussed today. And also, what can you tell to our merchants and audience today that they can take away from this conversation?
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaways are understanding when it comes to a merchant's risk, right?
Hmm.
Understanding the different, how high risk it is for a merchant to have an aggregator account and why those risks are higher. If you are in any of the high risk verticals, you should absolutely stay away from an aggregator account. I personally, Lisa Frixell, would never risk my merchant account, and I would never advise a merchant to risk their account by not being underwritten if you are in any high risk vertical, for sure. I'm not a huge fan of aggregator accounts for a lot of reasons, but
Hmm.
for the high risk industries, or if your business is a high risk model, it is not a good fit for you. And I would just never ever risk my cash flow ever. Secondly, merchants should understand that we take pride in the fact that we monitor your accounts. We will reach out with any questions we have or the processing bank has. Please, please, please pay attention and respond, right?
Hmm.
We are doing this on your behalf. At the end of the day, it changes nothing for us if you do or don't respond, other than you're going to see a loss of some kind and you're going to be upset, and you're probably going to be upset with us. But we're begging you to respond, right? Return a call to us, read your email, be a good partner to us, right? We want to be the best partner we can to you. Please be a good partner to us. Let us help you.
I love that. Let us help you.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, we really hope that all this information that we share and we talked about today, it was important to you guys that you're listening to this content. Remember that you can follow us on all of our social media. You can comment to this episode as well. You can also leave us questions if you want to ask questions, and then we can definitely go ahead and talk about those on our next episode. For now, I really want to thank you for your time, Lisa. Thank you for your knowledge that you share with our audience. Guys, stay tuned for more episodes. And thank you for listening to us today.
Thanks, Renee. A pleasure as always.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure for me too. Thank you, guys, and see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the High Risk Payments Playbook. If this episode brought you value, share it with a partner or a merchant who operates in a high risk industry. For more insights and resources, please visit us at zenti.com. That's ZENTI.com. Until next time, operate with efficiency, process smarter, and stay ahead of risk.